graph paper, controversy, role-playing, tabletops, sideburbs. Today on Chaotic Bazaar, we present our top 10 anything Dungeons and Dragons.
Welcome to Chaotic Bazaar.
What's happening, Lee?
Good spoopy afternoon, Jay. How are you doing today?
Excited to talk about some more D&D. Kinda as often.
Fair enough. And valid.
Yes, why don't we just dive right into it? I'll go ahead and I'll get started here.
Number 10.
Character creation. The expanse of character creation in D&D is gigantic, especially once it came to 3rd edition and they took away class level requirements, things like that for races and yada, 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 and broke it down to a more universal system. But here on screen, I'm just going to scroll through and show you the base / variant / monster and paragon classes. So these will all be... there's some epic ones too. Those don't really count, but for regular base classes, there's around 60 not counting variants. Here we go. I'm into the P's, the R's, the S's. Yes, we're still in just base classes essentially, or some are monster classes in here, which if you're going to play like a monstrous character, you'd have to take some levels of like a penalty or whatever, or some classes have it.
Right.
This next one is the list of prestige classes. So as we all know, in at least 3rd edition on, I don't know, 4th edition, they do whatever. At a certain level, once you've hit certain requirements, you can be a even better version of that, or, variant of that class. And so let's just even faster scroll through all the different prestige classes, including some epic ones, that you can do. I mean, I didn't count this one because this is significantly more. So just for example, the amount of character creation, and that's just picking your class, the amount of races, the amount of books that have races that you can play, the amount of just anything that you can do. And that's besides even picking your story, skills, any of that sort of stuff that go with your character. It's absolutely insane. And that's why it makes my number 10.
I like the fact you could do anything in D20. Your Tabaxi cleric can have like a handgun, and I can figure that out in D20, no problem. What kind of handgun does he have? Yeah, I'm sorry. My number 10 is the Blue Book box set. It's the original box set that came out after the Little box set, and the first one a lot of people outside of the wargaming industry saw. I happened to catch the wonderful picture of a wizard and a fighter fighting a red dragon on the box at like 7 or 8 years old, and insisted it come home with me. Once I opened that box, I learned a lot of things very quickly, including chits. What are chits? We'll get to chits in a little bit, but chits are not as good as dice. So I, of course, had polyhedral dice. It came with chits in the box. You got to cut them up. And it came with B1, that wonderful adventure, if people aren't aware of. It's kind of like a big dungeon crawl with options for you to modify the dungeon, and a very, very well fleshed out dungeon. It's a classic module. And then it came with some amazing artwork. Basically, they're calling it the basic D&D set at that point, before it was called a basic set. And then AD&D came out and everything got more convoluted. But super valuable book in my life. Pro Dragon, Pro Wizardry, Pro Dice Rolling, and it kind of started the whole thing for me.
Nice. Never had these. I got started on the red box, and
remember the red box too.
Yeah, the one that everyone uses that picture from, and then AD&D as well. Those.
Oh yeah, no. What's the Monster Manual like? One was in my hands right after it came out. It was over. The catechism class did not approve of me bringing Dungeons and Dragons books to catechism class.
Number 9.
Kobolds. I love kobolds for some reason. Right here on the screen, I got a picture of the original first edition kobold. Like, this is what they looks like.
That's how I picture them.
See, not the nose. The nose on this guy to me is kind of weird. It's much more dog-like than the newer version, which are more dragon-like. Even though they act kind of dog or puppy-like, in my opinion, with kobolds.
Small dog-like.
One of the first monsters you're going to run into when you first start playing D&D. You know, something that you can actually deal with generally. Look right here, even says 1 to 4 hit points. So even your dagger can take it out in one shot, possibly. And we got some new kobolds here too, so.
And let's hail Curdle Mac as well.
Yeah, I actually enjoy the 3rd edition kobolds, how they tried to balance them out to be even. The newer ones, I think they need another pass, but they're kind of, they've made kobolds from, I think they were kind of nastier in the earlier editions to being more cute in later editions. Like, they've definitely cutified kobolds and really picked up on their dragon ancestry in later editions.
My number 9 is the Displacer Beast. It's a large, monstrous, 6-legged feline with tentacles coming out of its shoulders that can injure you and grapple you, and it's affected by like kind of a displacement. You can't really see it. It's like a shifting image. It's kind of cloaked and moving to the side of where it actually is. I always thought they were really neat. I had one of the original Ralpartha minis, though I lost the tentacles years ago, and it's just basic. And I think it only had 4 legs anyways. So it's basically a puma, I guess.
That's what they always remind me of.
I would curl up with them. I would boop their nose. I would give them adventurers to feast on. I love them. I think they're wonderful animals and would make great dungeon pets. Let's say pets.
Number 8.
Magic Missile. Just the spell Magic Missile. Right here I have a demonstration from Baldur's Gate. Yeah. I love the animations for Magic Missile and thing, but one thing that's great about Magic Missile compared to other spells, and like I'm not sure why D&D didn't. I think they picked up on this in 5th edition for sure, and a little bit more in 3rd. But so spells like scale with you. A lot of the early edition spells like didn't scale, so like spells would be only either really situational or like only useful up to a certain point. Magic Missile was one that always scaled, and it was like kind of like your sword as a wizard. Obviously, you had to memorize them if you wanted to use them, and there was so much other stuff. But if you wanted to be a caster that did damage, Magic Missile was always your go-to.
Right. If you had a spell slot open, you didn't have that with you. Like, what are you doing? What are you even doing? Because the higher the level you are, even the most powerful wizards in the Forgotten Realms campaign and wherever else, all just like rocking you with as many magic missiles as their level allows.
It's an automatic hit.
Right.
Like,
can't block it
unless you
virtue shielding. That's about it.
Right, I was gonna say if you got shield up, but that's, or maybe counterspell or something like that. But that would higher level to waste on a magic first level spell.
My number 8 is world building. As somebody that's been dungeon mastering and game mastering and writing fiction and doing all sorts of weird things involving stories my whole life, nothing fleshed that out more effectively than what I got from role-playing games. And nothing fleshed that out any better than that role-playing game, because that's where it all started. Whether I was learning really good words for terrible people from random generations on the back of the DMG, or asking my mom what a strumpet was, or understanding the word chaos. All these things helped me build and understand characters and the environment. They had town building, they had world building. A lot of people would use the campaign stuff and adapt it. A lot of people would just build from scratch. You have to create why your world existed, who the characters are, what the dynamics are, what the politics of history have been, who the gods are, what the religions are, what the organizations are. I find all that stuff fascinating to set up and run. You get so many different opportunities because it's an open-ended storytelling game in a way that you could do literally anything, whether you've got, spaceships crashed in mountain ranges in your fantasy setting or not. Really helpful as a writer too, like your character development where you were talking about with characters. The fact that you define the character so well means that you can create a character with a story and it makes sense. You could just lock in that barkeep with the secret hidden story, or the local wizard with the dark past who you need the information from to progress on. It's so cool that they started this out before we had computer games, which make it a lot easier, obviously.
I think world building's great, especially with D&D. It's like they've added so many tools to help you world build. Like it's kind of it's such a big important part of it. Even if you're playing in a real campaign or whatever, like Forgotten Realms or whatever, you're still doing a little bit of world building modification already based on whatever they're doing, because whatever's happening in your game is changing things. Plus, everyone gets attributed to that world building, because when you start playing based on what characters are doing, just again, even outside. So like kind of everyone's
they're affecting it too. Right.
Yeah, so everyone's kind of a part of that world building, even if they're not making, the base level of it or whatever. They're still adding.
You provide the canvas, but they're certainly painting on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Number 7.
Magic users. So magic users, just in general in D&D, is my number 7. Especially early edition magic users. You can see here I have a picture of the original Unearthed Arcana cover. So wizards, specifically in earlier editions, started out extremely weak. Now they have cantrips are out of control, but like
they really
were so weak, but the reward to that was at high level. You were essentially a god at that point. Like other classes could not compete with high level wizards. Like at the highest of levels, wizards were always going to be the most powerful. You can argue if you had different magic items or whatever, but utility wise, everything wise, you're going to even be out of a cleric, because if a wizard's going to be fighting against a god, well, a cleric might not be able to do that if the god turns on them or takes away their power. But wizards, just such an interesting, or I should say magic users as they were referred to back then, such an interesting take. And of course they used the magic stylings that they took off of Jack Vance sort of writings.
For sure.
So you'd memorize
that style of high fantasy.
Yeah, you'd memorize the magic spell would be floating around, memorized magically in some sort of different dimensional thing in your head, and then when you used it, you'd forget it because you'd have to study it to remember it. And it's not really like that anymore. I mean, it kind of is, but not. They don't really talk about it like that in those terms.
It's got they tried to eliminate a lot of particular flavor in 5th edition. Like that's what I've noticed. Like they're not interested in the flavor as much per se anymore as the utility of the spell.
They're trying to open it up, and instead of making things seem so limited, and they're trying to balance things and stuff like that. Where that's why I like older D&D much more. It's interesting to see classes go through the arcs of strength and whatnot, but wizards always take magic users always take my number 1 for class.
Even John Irenicus. I'm sorry, I'm making John Irenicus jokes. Great voice acting, by the way. My number 7 pick. The early fantasy artists that helped early TSR products get their products to market. Oh my goodness. Some of these guys are huge nowadays, and if not, they're still nerds like me running around in their 50s wearing t-shirts with their art on them from back then. Errol Otis had like a lot, he didn't just, neither one of these guys that I'm going to be talking about did a lot. They did stuff outside of just straight fantasy art too. But there were people that played games. So people that were interested and could see in ways that I think other people couldn't yet, because your standard fantasy art at the time wasn't thinking like a Dungeons and Dragons game, as opposed to now it all does, thanks to these guys and others. Errol did like stuff for the early deities and demigods. He's got like a weird angular art style that is just kind of catches the eye. And did a lot of the iconics, box sets and modules. And then Jeff D, he did the same thing, but he had more of a comic, kind of a comic book style to his art as opposed to Errol Otis. But he's still bringing the same concepts to life, whether it's being trapped in an island full of, giant dinosaurs, or he did a lot of really good art for villains and vigilantes, which is not Dungeons and Dragons, but wouldn't exist if not for Dungeons and Dragons. And the characters that he drew were just amazing characters and pieces of art, in my opinion. That influenced movies, influenced fantasy art going forward. Dungeons and Dragons influenced heavy metal, and not that heavy metal didn't influence Dungeons and Dragons. And then, every Magic the Gathering card artist should throw a shout out to these early pioneering gentlemen.
I would just say all the art in general, like the D&D art, second edition is just amazing too. There's so many good art pieces come out of that era, and Dragon Magazine, and just oh man, the 80s and 90s. As it kind of went on, they got these really like just insane looking pictures before it kind of moved on to like the newer looking stuff when third edition came out.
Even good. Some of those, when I was looking through the second edition DMG, some of those pictures are amazing in that book. Like those are like Art Deco wall prints is what they should be.
You can order some of them like that.
Nice.
Number 6.
The Deck of Many Things. Holy shit. The Deck of Many Things. This thing is crazy. Right here on the screen, I have the very first edition of the Deck of Many Things. It says it's usually found contained within a box or leather pouch. Each deck contains a number of thin plaques or plates, but what it eventually ends up boiling down to is it's a tarot deck, right? I think anyone that's played D&D knows what the Deck of Many Things is. It's absolutely crazy.
Right. Unlike a tarot deck that's supposed to be defining your fate, it literally defines your fate.
Yeah.
Like you're not like, it's not like the tower means this. No, you're trapped in a tower.
Yeah, right. So let's just take a look at like just some of these. Like it's kind of weird at first edition if you haven't played first, if you only played some of the newer editions. Some of these things are kind of maybe don't make super sense, but you can make sense of it. Just for example, for the throne, you're going to gain charisma of 18 and a small keep. Well, I mean, that sounds kind of neat, but in first edition, keeps and armies actually mattered more. They had a lot more rules for that tied right into playing with like that was
stronghold.
Like a fighter's, one of a fighter's things is like they could, be a leader and recruit army sorts of deals.
Level 10? Is that when you could start building strongholds? I swear it was level 10.
Yeah, I can't remember. But there's just like skull, defeat death or be destroyed forever. It's just like so many crazy things. Just lose 10,000 experience and draw again. Maybe we know these things from the other ones. Yeah, Donjon, you are imprisoned.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of. Don Johnson.
But yeah, as you can see, they're all in here. I also have the second edition one so that we can, maybe a little blurry, but take a little bit of a different look. You get the small keep and the 18 charisma, and I think they added that back in second edition. I think there's literally a strongholds like in the fighter's manual, one of those extra books.
Yeah, I think it was still a thing. But I don't think by third edition it mattered anymore.
They changed a bunch in third edition. I just wanted to throw this up just to like say like, yeah, here's how it looked in this one, which a few of them are the same. We get the moon, you get 1d4 wishes. 1 through 4 wishes. They word it better so that I'm sure people are like, what is 1 through 4? Do I get a pick? Did I get 4 wishes? And they're like, damn it, we should have put 1d4 in it to make sense.
Right. Polyhedral dice, man. The most dangerous ones, really.
With Deck of Many Things, I'm sure it's ruined so many games and derailed so many games and added so many memories to games too, made games epic.
It could ruin a campaign. It could make the character overpowerful. It could make the character die. It can make the character change their alignment permanently, removing them. Like, because if you're playing a chaotic good character and you're suddenly like, lawful evil, like you're pretty much done in the campaign at that point, and it's time to roll up a new character. And the DM's got an NPC.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention, because I had the question, like, who made the Deck of Many Things? Where did it come from? And the only thing that I could find on it is, and I'm not sure which edition it was from. It looked like it was from 3rd or 4th edition. And it said something about when they come about, they just materialize once like too much peace and calmness has been like in an area or world for too long. And that was all I could find on it.
I think there was some talk in some of the sources stuff about it having to do with the ancient empire of Netheril, but that's Forgotten Realms exclusive.
I think but
they retcon everything there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, which could be a specific Deck of Many Things in that they're referring to, because this, like, they mention that they're plural, like they'll just appear in a world that's too calm. So if that's the only thing that we have to go on.
You can't buy your own Deck of Many Things. It has to be gifted to you. My number 6 pick is the legendary and super important convention called Gen Con. In 1968, there was a wargaming convention thing going on, and the big one was in Chicago, and nobody could make it. So Gary Gygax decided to do his own thing in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and put together his own festival for that. Just in like a year or two later, he's meeting industry people. They're coming to Gen Con in Geneva, Wisconsin. It ended up being like one of the biggest, and still is one of the biggest conventions for Dungeons and Dragons and other games, role playing and all sorts of other stuff nowadays. That's a long time, like 68. That's like 54 years. It says 2 years older than I am. That's insane. So after it kept building and I kept trying to get to Geneva, Wisconsin in the 80s, it moved around Wisconsin a couple times. It was in, I believe, Kenosha, and then it went to Milwaukee, and then it moved to Indianapolis in 2003. And that's where they currently still have it. I guess it'd be the 20th anniversary next year. Man, it's a big convention. I learned things about cosplay from knowing about Gen Con. I knew about Wisconsin because wanting to go to Gen Con. FASPA, one of the early organizations, ran their events there pretty early. And, if you're interested in role-playing games, cosplay, comic books, video game versions of things, pretty much everything is under that roof at Gen Con. They do it every year in Indy. They usually have an industrial after party, but that's a completely different story. And they even have the True Dungeon, which is a live action dungeon every year. I don't know how that is affected with in-person this year because of the pandemic, but almost every year they were doing escape rooms before people were doing escape rooms. You want to get t-shirts, you want to look at games, you can meet the vendors. It's an amazing thing to go do if you find any of those things interesting. I highly recommend you go once.
I've only been once or twice. I think just once, like 1995, I went to Milwaukee to Gen Con.
Nice.
Yeah, you can meet, besides just all those people that do just like any other convention. So they have, stars that are there.
Panels. Right.
All that.
You want to work on a game design, that sort of stuff at this point.
Yeah. What was that? Star Trek, the Next Generation collectible card games I was there for at that time, and Magic, and Thrill Kill for PlayStation, a game that ended up not getting released. It came out there. Everyone should look up that game. It was ridiculous. You can get copies of it. Like, it almost got finished, and then they didn't do it. And then, yes, those... At that time when I was going, that was when they were still at least having those awesome industrial after parties that White Wolf generally had a big hand in orchestrating. and lots of awesome bands would play. I can't remember who was playing that year, but I was definitely too young to do any of that stuff, unfortunately, at that time.
Well, I think it'd be too young for the Gothsicles to even be playing yet, so it probably wasn't the.
No, yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly.
Number 5.
Illithids, Mind Flayers. Love them. Somewhat of an original D&D creation. You can definitely see that Lovecraft was definitely like, you know, they kind of took the imagery of Cthulhu and said, hey, what about this too? The actual Gary Gygax is credited for saying he created it from the cover of the Titus Crow book, The Borrowers Beneath, by Brian Lumley. So I've read Necroscope. That's the only Brian Lumley book, that series I know, but I know he's done stuff forever. Necroscope is insane. Necroscope, that series is insane. I've only read the first book, but I can tell you, if you want to know what it would seem like for a real life necromancer to do what they do to use necromancer powers, but in like modern day stuff during, it's like Cold War, man, check it out. Anyways, Mind Flayers are insane. You'll see like a lot of, you'll see maybe a couple other things like this on my list, but they're outer space, kind of like how Lovecraftian deep horror stuff is, like the space horror thing. So that's you definitely see that. We see on the screen that they're gonna make another one by putting one of the slugs into them. Just gonna eventually turn the body into another host for Mind Flayer, more eggs to come out. Playing this,
gotta do what you gotta do.
What you're seeing on screen is actually from the intro of Baldur's Gate 3. They do such a great job of all the visuals of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about them later. I'm not going to go into like, oh, what are they? And I mean, because pretty much they're so big in D&D now that like Baldur's Gate 3 is like based off of them. Like they're the main villains essentially. I mean, I haven't really played through the whole thing, but according to the intro video, and you can see their Nautilus coming through the clouds right now, it's just, they're insane. There's something about Mind Flayers. All right, they're two things basically. They're psionicists and they're magic users, and they're from outer space, essentially, like, you know, deep space or whatever. So they're insane. So I love Mind Flayers,
and they can eat your brain.
Right. As an action,
like it's just that, right? It's just like them just reaching over, eating your brain. That's not magic. That's psionics. It's just eating your brain.
Yep, wrap them tentacles around your head, that beak comes in, and that's it.
Big fan. They're very scary in Baldur's Gate 2. But as they should be. Like, you know, you're already in kind of a funky neighborhood when you're in the Underdark, but you do not want to try and break into that guy's house.
Exactly.
My number 5 would be the miniatures we used to play the game with, and now we're just so commonplace and we're just so hard to get back in the day. Whether it be the funny fantasies of Ral Partha with their Have a Nice Day Beholder or Undead Pizza Delivery Man, or their serious magic users and fighters that I had, or Grenadier. I think I flipped them. Grenadier and Ral Partha both made some amazing stuff. And they made most of it. There were other people playing in the game. Some of those people are still around. But the detail that Ral Partha and Grenadier miniatures put into their miniatures back in the day made a huge difference, whether it was bugbearers or dragons or satyrs or nymphs. My mom was nice enough to get me the Grenadier Monster of the Month Club, and most of those were the funny fantasy ones. So I had nice. There's a Grateful Undead. It was basically the Grateful Dead, but they were undead playing musical instruments. There's a Have a Nice Day Beholder, a F-19 Pegasus. It was like a Pegasus with actual guns and bombs on it.
I might have that undead one somewhere, the Grateful Undead one packed away somewhere. Might still have that one. I think I got that at one time because my dad is a huge Grateful Dead fan, so it was easy to get something like that.
As opposed to that Ral Partha, Three Stooges, Etten, whatever the hell's going on there. I'm not sure what that's about, or, you know, what the actual, like, danger the encounter would be.
There's miniatures is one of those things that could get people into D&D that I see people now, noobs, obsess over models and stuff. Like they barely know the rules and how to play, but they already have a dozen models. They're loving the painting and they love making the characters like and making up their own stories around it or whatever. So like the models are such an integral part. I mean, Games Workshop understood that really well.
Oh, for sure they did.
Which I know I used to use a lot of Warhammer Fantasy models as our characters because you could find so many different, characters. If you were playing elves, they had like elf armies with like 50 different types of elves. You didn't have to just use
right. In 20 years ago or 10 years ago, even you had to actually kind of repurpose things to use for specific things you were trying to do, as opposed to now my roommate can print Dungeon Master on Monday, like the original Dungeon Master, and then paint him on Tuesday. It's also a good reason to collect terrain. I'm just throwing that out there.
Number 4.
Spelljammer. That is what I am talking about. See, even on the cover here, you can see we have a Mind Flayer right there. What is Spelljammer? If you're asking, you can see it's 2nd edition. It's D&D in space. And it is... All right, so some of the mechanics are kind of iffy. Like things get a little too much in the minutia. Like I think the flying can take a bit, like the space battles, some of all that stuff. But they tried to simplify some of it and make it work in. But one of the greatest things about Spelljammer, in my opinion, is how it connects all of the D&D worlds, or how it tried to, and connect everything in a physical way as opposed to just, teleporting through planes or whatever, like that sort of thing. It's like you get in a ship and you could fly from Kryn to Faerun. How crazy is that? But anyway, so like how do you fly a ship? How does a ship work? It works on magic, of course, but how do you fly a ship? Well, you have a wizard or a psionicist use their memorized spells or whatever to be able to control the ship, plus a helm that was like this chair or crown or whatever they would sit into to be able to control the Spelljammer itself. Now, the Spelljammer is the campaign, but the Spelljammer is also the legendary Spelljammer ship. And Spelljammer is also just the name of any ship. So there's Spelljammer the campaign, there's Spelljammer the ship, and then there's Spelljammers.
Spelljamming ships.
Which are all the other ships. So besides some of the weird, naming conventions, it's absolutely awesome. Yeah.
Which is a real thing, Phlogiston, or they thought it was a real thing, Phlogiston.
Yeah, back in like ancient Roman times or ancient Greek times. Which is the stuff that exists or in between the space, which is super flammable.
It's actually 18th century chemistry.
You're like, how do you breathe in AD&D space? Well, gravity and oxygen are attached, and they attach to like ships and people for a certain amount of time after leaving an atmosphere or something that has a bigger version of it. So if you fell off of your ship out into space, even though space like makes your ship like gravity, so your ship is the center of gravity, so you can walk around it like, so it's just kind of weird, but like you would have a little bubble of oxygen that lasts for so many turns around you, just like the ship has that, and bigger ones have more so they can travel further and things like that without having to stop on another world. This is the campaign setting that I wish D&D would come back with hard, because then you can
should.
Because then you don't have to spend your time in Forgotten Realms. Cool, you can make your Drow character there, which you can make Drow in Eberron now or anywhere else. It doesn't really matter. But and now you can fly elsewhere. Now you can be in Dark Sun and the desert world of Athos, and like whatever. It'd be fantastic. So it's Spelljammer, and here's another one of the classic books. Again, Mind Flayer right on the cover of this one as well. And this guy even looks like he has like some sort of cybernetic eye patch thing going on. It's a great marriage. I'd suggest to anyone, go check it out, because one of the other cool things is the ship design and all the ship designs for all the different monsters and races and stuff. It all works so well. the art for it.
I really liked the fact they linked everything. It gave me some early ideas on how to have alternate realities of campaigns and linking them together. And it's not too slippery slope to take that into Star Wars from there.
Yeah, I've heard it considered Star Wars D&D basically.
Well, I mean, getting to the actual Star Wars campaign in D20, but with your 10th level wizard or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. You'd like, what, your wizard's going to fly. You could be flying a little fighter jet thing, and you could be like using force powers, flaming blade. I
don't know if you can set that up in Total War or not, but I'd like to see that fight. My number 4 would be polyhedral dice. Once upon a time, there were mostly 6-sided dice, which most people are familiar with the 6-sided dice, whether it's your Yahtzee or you bought some pink unicorn dice.
My least favorite dice.
Because I own some pink unicorn dice, but
not pink unicorn. I mean, 6-sided dice are my least favorite dice.
Sure. Well, I mean, I don't harbor them any different will than I do the rest of their family and friends.
I don't know.
Though, of
you
course,
play enough Warhammer, you start hating 6-sided dice.
Well, fair enough. But I'm sure people like even Access and Allies are like, whatever, man. But whatever. You can they come in all sorts of varieties, from 4-siders to 30-siders. Back in the day, you had chits. And so the way a chit worked is you would cut these pieces of paper with the different numbers and the variables. So like 1 dice 4, you had a 1 through 4 on a piece of paper, and you'd reach your hand in and grab the right chit out of the bag or whatever. And that's how you rolled dice if you didn't have dice. Then of course the wonderful kind of cheesy blue plastic cheap ones that originally came with everything that they put out back in the day. And then people started making dice, and suddenly there was a lot of dice. And that was in the late 70s, early 80s. So now if you want dice, dear Lord, you can get some dice. You can get personalized dice, you can get Gemcone cut dice, you can get literally made from bones to roll.
Dice within dice?
Yes. And I'd also like to mention the 4-sided dice that was mentioned earlier in the episode make the best emergency caltrops, especially if they've got the hard edge, because it's basically kind of like a pyramid. So you're basically throwing down hard plastic pyramids behind you if someone's chasing you.
Magic missile and wizard hit point dice coming into play again, even more useful than just...
No, I've stepped on them enough times that I'm quite assured that it's just as bad, if not worse, than the standard Lego injury.
Oh, it's worse than a Lego. I've never had a Lego puncture me like I've had a D4 puncture me, and a D4 puncture is bad.
Ow.
Yeah.
That's kind of where some sort of nerd points, though.
Those older ones, like you were talking about, they were like the cheaper plastic.
Sharp.
They were sharp on the edges, not like these new ones. And that was one of the ones. I mean, it wasn't sharp at the point, super sharp at the point, but it was way sharper than these ones, and the edges were sharp, and that's one of the ones that I stepped on. Fantastic.
The metal ones you could probably knock somebody out with, because they make those too.
But there's nothing quite like
throwing dice at people.
There's nothing quite like rolling some really heavy dice or rolling D20s. Like rolling a D20 gives you it is fun just to roll a D20.
And you could get a critical failure or a critical success.
I just enjoy rolling D20s.
I'm just saying, we're habituated now to look for those ones in 20s now when somebody does. Maybe not the case 54 years ago. Thanks, War Games.
No.
Hey, check it out. I got the stack of many things. I've been dying to pull a card. Okay, here we go.
If it's a rug that's bothering you.
What? Oh, Don Johnson? Don Johnson? Don John?
Keep your armor shiny as linoleum. Buy our all-new Rust Monster Oleum. 3 out of 4 plate-wearing paladins agree.
Number 3.
Dragonlance campaign setting. The novels, yeah. I mean, the campaign setting's based off of the writings. So let's take a look at this real quick.
I have cast a spell upon our belongings. Any who touch them faces a hideous death, painfully devoured by the great worm Caterpillius.
Caterpillius. This was an excerpt from
Caterpillius.
what should have been an awesome cartoon movie anime. I don't know. When they tried to make Dragonlance into a motion picture, sort of, and they mixed 3D animation with, I don't know, 6 frame per second Saturday morning cartoon 80s. They got Kiefer Sutherland to play Raceland, and then he just delivers every line like he does not give a shit at all. Like, just doesn't care and has no idea what's going on. And the sad thing is, there's interviews with him saying how hard he worked at it. But let's get away from that, because it's one of those things like the Star Wars holiday special that it's usually only brought up as a joke, because Weiss and Hickman wrote 6 of my favorite books ever. When I come into the top whatevers, I group all 6 of these into one because I look at them as one story, kind of. 2 trilogies of books, and the first is the Dragons or the Chronicles, which is, Dragons of Autumn Twilight, Winter Night, and Spring Dawning. And this is the Heroes of the Lance story. So you meet Tasselhoff barefoot, you follow Tanis, you follow like the struggle of what it's like to be a half elf in a world of either elves or humans where they don't necessarily get along, all the racism involved there. Did I say Tasselhoff already? Because you just get to meet Tasselhoff and follow him around. One of my favorite characters in there, but Raceland, who like is another just absolute perfect, you almost want to say wizard, like
he's an archetype. He's an archetype almost.
I want to say like a cliche, but because of him is almost like, so there had to be so much inspiration from him as wizards, even though I know there were a bunch of wizards beforehand. And he was definitely taken, has some of that Vancian magic or writing like added to him, but like, what, dude's a cripple, and even more cripple because of his because of magic, but is like a prodigy in magic and struggles with being absolutely evil. I don't want to give it away because that's like good and evil is like a big part of all of this and the inner struggles of the characters, especially in the next 2 series books that I have here. Which is the Time of the Twins, which more focus on, it still has everyone around, but focus on Raceland and Caraman, and Caraman's his brother, who's the big fighter, gigantic, 7 foot tall, beautiful looking, like just like they're polar opposites basically, where Raceland's like this frail, like on the verge of death, like pitiful sort of character. And it's just like they're twins. I mean, even though they don't really get described as twins, and they definitely don't look alike.
Right. But they are.
These stories, they're so good. These 6 books I recommend to anyone. Beyond that, like other people will recommend other books, and the stories go on from there and there and there, and it goes to their kids and all that sort of stuff, and generations on.
Did you play any of the modules?
I played in the world, and so yes and no, because a lot of times we played, we never 100% would follow modules like that, but like, so because it depends on who you play with. So some people didn't like to have the characters in it, like Raceland's too cool to be around, you'd never run into him, like they, when I was playing, so it'd be like that, like that sort of stuff, so it's just kind of like the gate, the D&D gatekeeping that goes on.
Oh, I
have to know. So like, yeah, so I was involved in a lot of that stuff, but I love playing in Kryn. The Urda, the playing as a Minotaur, like there's just, and they're so fleshed out, and they're not like the other races on the other worlds when you have them. I love Kryn.
the modules were, if you like the stories, I highly recommend some of the early modules because they directly kind of correspond. And then on top of that too, that's when they first started doing that 3D geometric dungeon stuff, was in the back of the Dragonlance modules. So like before that, it was just all a flat top down. You didn't have any depth to the mapping, and like they taught us that technique from Dragonlance, and that was a big deal. You can't have a 2D Underdark, man.
If I'm not mistaken, Hickman was like insanely talented at writing adventures. That's where this stuff comes, like why this transfer, like I don't know why this works, but like people like
he made his hobby his job.
I'm not sure if it was from Dragon Magazine where like it came through. I read up on this one time because obviously I really like this. His style basically became standardized at TSR to use his style of planning out adventures, because he took what the old guys did, like first, you know, when they were originally coming up with this stuff, but then like kind of like made it a science, like here's the formula and everybody could run with it. And it was like, perfect. This is the exact way you want to, like how you present the information, how, like, you know, just kind of everything.
No, it was nice. It was very nice. Like it pulled it together, because a lot of modules didn't have that kind of setup as well. Like it was messier on a lot of modules. His stuff was just, wow.
Yeah, so go read all 6 of those books. I'm telling you, like once you start reading the first one, it's hard to stop. Once you get through this, once you end Test of the Twins, oh my God, you're like, okay, and it ends. It's everything is so satisfying. You're like, I do want to go on and see more, but like you feel that there's a full end to the story. Unlike a lot of, I feel, fantasy stuff where it always feels like they're leaving stuff open to be able to write another book and cash in, even though like they do keep going in Dragonlance. Like it feels like it has, you go from level 1 to gods, you know, it's insane throughout that whole thing.
My number 3 is driving dungeon masters off their gourd, off their plans, off whatever they thought was going to happen. And you know, this is like, it's a deep thing to do stuff like that consistently when you are a dungeon master. So, you know, when I get and I won't call myself a problem player. So, all right, so you go through all this trouble, you make this campaign, you make this wonderful world, and then you say, all right, I need characters to populate this world so I can run this adventure, and then I show up. And I'm probably a multi-class character with a backstory from outside the universe you've created. That's like a good starting point for me. Then I'm going to min-max all my roles to the point where, like, even other min-maxers, I didn't know you could do that. And you're going to forget most of what I've done until in the moment when the campaign thing happens and I fly after the guy escaping or whatever the else happens. I've consistently surprised and upset dungeon masters since I've started playing. It's usually not, I'm not just trying to be obnoxious per se. I just play differently, I guess. And I've been derailed myself. People will not, I guess the point is I'm very random. And the number one thing the dungeon master doesn't want in most stories when they have a setting and a plot hook and everything else is a min-maxing person that's going to do the unexpected. It can completely throw your game out of balance, and make you have to think on the fly a lot more than you probably will even after you've prepared for every eventuality.
I swear I've seen How to Be a Good like player videos, and they all say not to do what you're describing right now.
Yes. And so I've transcended that because I'm considered a good player, but I basically have most of the habits they warn you not to develop, and I had them developed before. Well, I mean, Gygax wrote a wonderful book called, like, you know, I can't remember what it's called, but it was all about that sort of stuff, being a good player, being a good dungeon master. It's kind of like a self-help book for dungeon masters in the 80s.
But I mean, that's just kind of like that. It's just so natural to want to, when you're playing this game and you're trying to master the game, be the best at the game. So then some min-maxing comes in and things like that, even though the greatest part about this game isn't any of that stuff.
No, you could have a wonderful time with like a character that has no capability of doing anything because of the environment it's in.
Right. It's like how some people like survival games where you always feel like, or you basically are losing every turn. Like basically it's how long can you last before you lose? And there's no real way to be like, okay, I can sustain forever. You know, like some people like that feeling when they're playing a game and other people like the feeling of they're winning. And I think that's the kind of the difference between some people that could like are fine with being, and probably when you play Call of Cthulhu, it's like this because you're basically always going to lose. Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah,
right?
you're destined to go insane or die.
Yeah,
maybe not in that order.
Right. So there is no way of winning. So, but that's maybe not approachable for people. But in D&D, they're like, the game is kind of there where you could have it in a way where you're the hero of the story, just like a movie, and like you always win and everything's always kind of like that. And you're the powerful one. And that's kind of like, I'd say like a lot of people are drawn to D&D for that, that sort of thing, being like the hero of the story, as opposed
maybe you've
to
always
just,
wanted to retire early and like, want to open a bar.
I was going to say, as opposed to just being like a player in a story and all being in a cooperative story and just seeing wherever it goes.
Right.
You know, I'd say a lot of people take D&D and add competitive. I've played too many games, and maybe Dungeon Masters are somewhat at fault here since we're on Dungeon Master thing right now. But where like everyone has like 3 18s and it's like, do you know how hard it is to get an 18? Even if you're rolling 4 dice, taking the best one and re-rolling ones, that's still pretty fucking difficult. So like I could see getting 1 in 6 rolls where you're doing that much thing, but if you're like, it's bet when everyone rolls at the table that people with 17s are like, yeah, I'm rocking it,
Right. Well, and yeah, basically taking all 3s.
But but it's kind of fun. It's all up to the DM though. And so like I was gonna say,
you can survive as a fighter on all 3s.
You could, maybe. I was going to say, I'm usually trying to get on the good side of DMs as opposed to being on the bad side because...
Well, it's the other thing. I'm not adversarial about any of this. I'm really working on his campaign and his story and trying to really do his adventure.
Depending on the DM, if you're not doing exactly what they're thinking, then they're getting upset with you too, right? I mean, so it's just
well, that's on them, right? You have to be prepared for your players to just do anything.
And in that case, you should make the DM mad. If you're just on one train and you're playing their story and you're all playing a game together, then go ahead and make that DM mad, unless that's what you want to be involved with.
If they're a good one, they're going to be able to guide you back to the story pretty effectively without getting mad.
And speaking of Dungeon Masters,
Number 2,
Gary Gygax.
The Dungeon Master.
Yeah, the Dungeon Master, one of the ones who started it all. I hate when everyone just says Gary because there's other guys involved, Dave Arneson, for example, but
Right.
Yeah, I would say probably without Gary, who was probably the biggest driving force behind it, we wouldn't be playing D&D. We'd be playing some weird Lord of the Rings Warhammer game, and we all know how their Warhammer RPGs went. They're not D&D for a reason. Gary Gygax, the man. I do have just a little bit. I don't need to go in about who he is, what he did, anything like that. You guys go look him up. This isn't a documentary about that. This is just my number 2 in D&D, and it's kind of like number 2. Yeah, my number 2. Maybe my number 1 for other reasons.
To my left, you'll recognize Gary Gygax, inventor of Dungeons and Dragons.
Greetings. It's a pleasure to meet you.
We're good.
What?
Let's try something else. Maybe we should...
Put the dice away before I take them away.
Wait. All right, but I need a weapon to fight off drunken robots when I wake up.
Here, take my +1 mace.
All over again.
Anyone want to play Dungeons and Dragons for the next quadrillion years?
Sure, I guess.
On to Rook 8.
I'm a 10th level vice president.
So yeah, I mean, he was even he voiced himself kind of making fun of himself in Futurama. which is pretty fantastic. The guy had a crazy time. Here's a young picture of Gary when he was just about to be a multimillionaire. And there's crazy stories about the guy. So he's not all just comic book smelly nerd. He's also fat palatial California mansions with cocaine and hooker parties. The dude is all over the place. Fantastic though. So I just want to make sure I thank Gary for that. And while he isn't technically a mechanic or a thing in D&D, he is, my number 2 of.
He's the guardian spirit of the game itself.
From what I understand, I have magic users on my list. I think Gary hated magic users. If I remember some stories, he did not like wizards and magic users. And I think that is one of the reasons they're so underpowered at low levels.
Well, I mean, it's kind of game breaking. If you have high level wizard powers at level 1 while your fighter and your thief are trying to unlock stuff and kill kobolds.
I would argue that a level 1 wizard's like unfun to play unless you're in a campaign with a good DM that's, doing stuff. In many campaigns that become hack and slash campaigns, you're a dart thrower or a dagger stabber or a turn waiter, like for most of the dungeon, like
Right. But that's why the wizard's usually in the back, if not the 6.
Yeah, you're
because
a dart thrower.
you have to make sure the wizard's alive so you can read the scroll or whatever back in early levels. Or, if we need an emergency light source, he's got one spell. It'll be fine.
But that's what I'm saying. Nowadays, that's changed to being like, it's kind of, you have your cantrips and you're basically using a long
They're highly
from
survivable comparably.
Every turn. Yeah, that is still one of their low ends, but compared to them, they're way more survivable.
Cantrips do damage now.
They're also not OP. They're not as OP at high levels as they once were. I mean, some spells are still pretty fantastic, but not like comparatively
you can't
in first
turn
edition.
9 magic missiles at level 20 like you could in the prior editions. Well, second and first.
Well, you get way more powerful as fighters in these other editions where you just didn't in other editions. Like you got more attacks, but now in this one you get things that allow you to always have advantage and always this and always this. So always advantage. It's like adding a 50% chance to hit, it's just it's crazy. So
right.
Or it might even be higher than that, what it actually adds when you look at the math. So it's fighters get a lot more than they used to get, even though they were just straight up powerhouses the whole time. The only thing that sucked about fighters is they had a couple bad saves at high end. And depending on the type of fighter you went with, barbarians were really specialized. They all had really big negatives except for fighters,
Right. It was a generic powerful fighter icon as opposed to the specific other builds.
Right, but they didn't have all the negatives. Some of the bonuses didn't matter. Cavalier bonuses weren't very good bonuses compared to the negatives that they got at higher levels.
Right.
At lower levels, they were better, but there's a paladin. It's just amazing. They were the only good ones that scaled.
It's been so long since I played any sort of barbarian from first or second edition.
I think that's where not being able to use magic items comes from. Barbarians didn't like magic users in their party. They conflicted with people that use magic. So they're like, oh, we don't believe in magic. First edition barbarians. It was kind of weird. And they brought that back as a prestige class in third edition. One of them where you couldn't use magic items, but you got bonuses instead.
My number 2 is monstrous women. So, I realized mythologically such things existed. And I had seen a picture here or there, whether it be the goddess Hel or a harpy. But man, in Dungeons and Dragons, you suddenly had all these women monsters and powerful, dangerous women monsters, whether it was Asmodeus's daughter or Harpy Sideburb, or Lamias, or, there's 1,000 of them, Penangallons. I think the reason I liked it so much is they were presented as more, in a fantasy setting, normally the monster is just this thing that's warned about the hero. In a D&D fantasy setting, that's not the case. You're dealing with these creatures. So psychologically, I think that pinged my brain long before I dealt with more realistic women monsters. And, I don't have a lot to say about it that's safe for TV, but that's my number 2. Think 1978 Blue Book.
There was a lot of art, and I think it was, especially in comic books and around that time. And who was the guy? Franz?
I was just thinking of his name. Franz. I can't remember his name. The fantasy artist.
Yeah. And his stuff always had that savage, barely or not even clothed women. And
well, right. But these are just creatures that don't wear clothes. You invaded their house and they're trying to eat you. But
then you take a bunch of guys that turn that Franzetta, there you go. That turned it into a game and loved this dude's artwork as well. And we're like, so all the monsters are these hot chicks too. D&D has come a long way. They don't do that in nowadays D&D. And I understand that, but I also agree with you. I have a lot of memories as a young child looking through.
when you're a teenage boy, it's more the risque factors of the monstrous women. Now it's the fact that, wow, they're women monsters. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a different sort of, it doesn't have to be lewd. A powerful, monstrous woman is a powerful, monstrous woman, and to be respected.
Through the 80s, it was lewd.
Oh, for sure it was. And that may have, in Harpy Sideburb, 1978. Thanks, Gary Gygax. Sideburb.
Honorable mention. 3rd edition, I think, did to D&D what really needed to happen to D&D for it to start being able to hit a more mainstream spotlight. And what that is it took if you go back and look at 1st and 2nd edition, you'll see all the mix mash systems that you have to know each thing. Each stat works a little differently and you get a little bit different bonuses here or there. And it's not that you get the same amount of bonuses for a 17 on strength as you would for charisma or whatever. No, all those are different. Every little thing is handled so much differently. You get to 3rd edition, you could see they were trying to make this baseline to make everything kind of work the same sort of way, like on like a metric system as opposed to, imperial system. And that's kind of how I feel about when 3rd edition came in, that's kind of what they did. No more weird level caps. I mean, they kind of did away with that in 2nd edition, or at least a lot of people quit playing like that. But multi-classing was just like so much different, just everything became so much different in 3rd edition. A lot of changes that they needed that I felt the older editions had like gatekeepy feels that in 3rd edition they kind of did away with without going too far into the everything's the same category.
Right. No, even though they had ways to quickly and easily figure stuff out within D&D or D20, it was amazing in 3rd edition. Like I said, those kobolds need guns. Hold on, I got it. It's literally that easy. The kobolds now have guns. Let's change the CR rating by a couple points because they've got guns, and it was quickly and easily handled. Good stuff, whether you're playing a psionic warrior monk or not. My first honorable mention is the Forgotten Realms setting. It has been used ad nauseum and been in everything, and it's just so full of power. It has a Marvel-esque quality to me. Like, there are so many epic, ridiculous characters in this environment that you can go for a walk and, fight a god, fight an archmage, fight a lich, and then the whole thing could happen the next day and nobody's going to be surprised that the exact same 3 archetypes have shown back up. Get in a fight with a dragon? No problem. Here's another dragon. You upset the cult of the dragons? Here's a Draco-Lich too. All in the same, that could be the same encounter in the Forgotten Realms. You've got really interesting characters, really fleshed out lands, a really fleshed out setting, memorable archmages aplenty, not just one. Sure, there's the money shot Elminster for sure. But dude, the symbol of Aglaron, there's like a bajillion powerful mages in the Forgotten Realms as opposed to Dragonlance.
Hey, Dragonlance only goes up to level 9 or some shit technically. So
right,
I don't
right.
Oh, but what are you talking about? Dragonlance has a link to Ravenloft with Lord Soth. Like,
we'll just have to go to all those locations when we get on the Spelljammer.
I was just gonna say they're all linked with Spelljammer, so that makes Spelljammer even better. All of them.
The Spelljammer. If we have a Spelljammer campaign, I think it's imperative we both get our hands on the Spelljammer and fly around on the Spelljammer, not a Spelljammer.
I was also going to say I hate Forgotten Realms, but not because Forgotten Realms is bad. Because, like, come on, can I really?
It's been used a lot,
and that's what it's like to me. It's like when you hear a song, like, and not when you hear a song that you play to yourself over and over and over that you don't really get too bored of. But it's like when you go to the store, and like everywhere you seem to go, you hear the same song, and you're just like, this song was kind of okay. I didn't dislike it, but now I cannot stand this. But I do like Forgotten Realms. Like, I love Drizzt. Drizzt is such a great character. There's a reason why Drizzt is such a popular character, because it's very well written and very cool stories happening around all of that, Well,
I mean, everybody should have some sort of, like, cat that's made of stone that you can turn into, like, a real cat for at least a few hours a day.
Forgotten Realms has a lot of really cool ideas in it. It does. Because it's such a rich world that there's so much going on and like so much different things. Like, isn't like Oriental Adventures like part of Forgotten Realms originally?
Yeah.
Like
character.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just like it's a very well. It's not like when you look at other ones and you feel like the whole planet is like one campaign feeling. There's a lot going on in Forgotten Realms. It's just they always use the same damn places all the time. Start using other places, Wizards of the Coast and TSR, whoever the hell. I'm
whoever
sick of
owns
seeing
it right
the same 3 places in Forgotten Realms. That's all I'm really getting. I'm sick of seeing the same stories retold over and over in Forgotten Realms when it has such a rich world to explore. Dark Sun, you knew it was going to be on here somewhere when I start talking about it. Because I love this campaign setting. I love the artwork. All the artwork was done by the same dude, Brom. It's like Conan the Barbarian kind of meets D&D. You have insects. Half giants are a normal thing. You have half human, half sterile, half human, half dwarf race that were made as like slaves, basically, who are the mole that are just absolutely crazy, like amazing. Everything in this is so fleshed out and so it feels so real for how savage it is, and then like you add on how the magic and everything works, and it's just like essentially using magic destroys the planet and like all the like the living stuff on the planet, and it's like, oh man. So then you have these huge power struggles, and then like magic eventually makes you either like basically takes you over and changes you if like you're going in that route, and it's like you're not ever going to be you again. Like everything is so extreme in it, like
even the halflings,
especially the halflings are like the basis of Dark Sun and why the world got destroyed in the way it is and everything, and why they're not the ruling race on Athos anymore. But it's just like, yeah, it's another world I wish they bring back. Shout out to whoever is doing the Neverwinter Nights Dark Sun remake.
What?
I've been following that one on Twitter for years, like, and I don't know how much of it's out, but I've been waiting for a finished product that I can just be like, cool, because I don't have spoilers and be along in with it. But I'm always hoping somebody remakes the Crimson Sands MMO or something, like a version of, let me just play some weird demo of it so I know what it was like, even though you can't because they literally had people in there making the story happen.
Right on. Random dungeon generator. When the DMG originally came out, like 79, 80, I think it's 79. Dude, like, you couldn't play games that randomly generated dungeons unless you worked on the computers at MIT or whatever. And it was amazing. Like, I could sit there, I couldn't get anybody to play with me for a couple of years, but, I'm trying to learn D&D by myself at like 11 or 12 years old. And so I'm actually like, rolling up the dungeon as I go, and they automated all of it. So you didn't really need to do anything but populate it as you open the door, as you went down the corner. It was like a mud. But using the dice, those wonderful polyhedral dice and percentile rolls, you could populate different levels of a dungeon and just keep going until you died or you made friends with all the monsters or whatever the case may be. And then I think it's even cooler that was Appendix A in the original Dungeon Master's Guide, and it's also Appendix A in the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. So I think as I get myself comfortable with the rule sets and playing different characters before I start my current campaign, I'm probably going to actually use the random dungeon generation method. I just think it's a neat little thing that you couldn't do with a computer back in the day that you can certainly do a little bit better now. In fact, most of the games that we use online are kind of based on that to an extent. They're the visual representation of those dungeons. We're just sharing them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm flicking through it right now, down to Appendix C now, but you could just see all the different roll stuff in here, like the traps, just like everything, magic pools, lakes,
flavor text, all sorts of stuff.
It's just like anything you can think of you'll be able to roll right on here if you were making a dungeon. And then it has that solo play, like you said, somewhere right here. I saw it somewhere where they mentioned the solo play. You can go find the 1st edition book somewhere. It might be hard to purchase.
Or it's in the back of the DMG, Appendix A, 5th edition.
Yeah, right. I was just saying, if you want to look at the original one and see all the stuff they had to compare it.
Number 1.
The Wish Spell. Yes, even more broken than the Deck of Many Things, more game-altering, more argumentative, more crazy is the Wish Spell. Of course, when you have a fantasy game, you have to figure out how the hell do genies work. They grant wishes, right? So we have to be able to put this in paper. So what I have on the screen here is from the very 1st edition. And the Wish Spell is a more potent version of Limited Wish, which I'll talk about later. If it is used to alter reality with respect to hit points sustained by a party, to bring a dead character to life, or to escape from a difficult situation by lifting the spellcaster and his or her party from one place to another, it will not cause the magic user any disability. Other forms of wishes, however, will cause the spellcaster to be weak, -3 on strength, and require 2 to 8 days of bed rest due to the stress the wish spell places upon time, space, and his or her body. Regardless of what is wished for, the exact terminology of the wish spell is likely to be carried through. This discretionary power of the referee is necessary in order to maintain game balance, as wishing another character dead would be grossly unfair. For example, your DM might well advance the spellcaster to a future period where the object is no longer alive, i.e. putting the wish character out of the campaign. That's the spell. So you tell me what it does.
Very carefully.
So you tell me what it does. It literally does anything. Anything that you can get the DM to let you do, this spell does, which is absolutely amazing. And that's why I say high-level wizards, the greatest things ever, because you can't compete against a wish spell. You can't. The only person that can beat the wish spell is the DM. A god can't even beat a wish spell if the DM doesn't want the god to. You know what I mean? It's just like you can shoot lightning bolts at a god all day long. If they got lightning resist, it don't matter. You know what I mean? If they're immune to magic, it don't matter. But like if you make wishes, it literally says in here you can alter space and time with these wishes, because it says, depending how strong of it is, you have to wait 8 days. You can create planets with the wish spell. You can create universes. It's insane how strong the wish spell can be.
A lot of people, if I recall, use wishes to make pocket dimensions in the lore.
Especially in 1st edition. So now I have text from the 2nd edition. Let's see if it changed too much. So it's a more potent version of Limited Wish. If it is used to alter reality with respect to damage sustained by a party, to bring a dead creature to life, or to escape from difficult situation by lifting the spellcaster and his or her party from one place to another, it will not cause the wizard any disability. It's the exact same wording so far. Other forms of wishes, however, cause the spellcaster to weaken -3 strength and require 2d4 days of bed rest due to the stress the wish places upon time, space, and his body. So again, like I've pointed out, that one of the changes is they only change telling you what dice you're supposed to roll and not say it's 2 to 8. Who decides? Is it because the wish is stronger or no? It's you just roll. Regardless of terminology, it is likely to be carried out. Casting wish ages the spellcaster 5 years. So now we also see a very big movement from first edition to second edition, where first edition, you could be casting, think about it, 2 to 8 days or 0, depending on the wish. You could be casting wish over and over and over and over. Oh, nope, I'm going to teleport this way. Oh, nope, I'm going to heal us. Oh, nope, I'm going to do these things that I can do. And you're invincible as long as you have wish memorized and you can't, but now in second edition, we say, ooh, every time you use it, it's 5 years of your life gone. And then it gives more information about the discretionary, discretionary power of the DM is necessary in order to maintain game balance, for example. And it's wishing that is basically the same thing as what they said in the first one, but
right. But they're getting more specific as they go.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pull up the third edition. We'll look at Limited Wish and see how that's different. It's a level 7 spell instead. It can't substantially change major realities, nor will it bring wealth or experience merely by asking. So that's one of the things. You could just gain levels. You can wish for levels. You can wish to be rich. It doesn't matter. The game's over once you have wish spell. That's why I said fighter doesn't get a game over. They don't get an I win button. Neither do thieves, But yeah, so it's just like, it's a weak version of that. I see like the new versions, like you can use it to like res maybe and like heal your party. Like it's basically you can be a cleric.
You can use it as a resurrection. There are lots of things.
You can cast any 6th level or lower spell, like if it's a 7th level spell, I think Limited Wishes still, but in the new version.
My number 1 pick is multi-classing characters. Now, having mentioned the min-maxing, and it's not always about that. Sometimes you want to play a wizard with a sword, or a thief that likes to create illusions, or a fighter magic user thief, which was the best combination you could use in first and second edition, because you don't need a party. You are the party. We gotta disarm this trap. Got it. We need to get you in the front. We need a tank. Got it. And we can't read magic. Got it. It was one reason to play elves for sure, or half elves even, because it was such a potent, ridiculous combination. Sure, you couldn't do the high level things everybody else could do, but man, the versatility you had. And as they head into third edition, who doggy did they give me some material? Because of the nature of third edition and because of D20, if you want, I don't know if I want to play a psionicist. I don't know if I want to play a psionic warrior. I don't know if I want to play a monk. I'll just make all 3 the classes of my character. And, it's like 4th edition was terrible. You need an extra book. 5th edition isn't that bad. It's not as OP. 3rd edition is ludicrous. You could just make... wait, are you telling me that I have these opportunities in 5th edition as well?
Yeah, there's definitely some broken stuff in 5th edition. It's just... It's not like fun broken like 3rd edition, where but there's some dumb broken stuff in 5th edition. That has to be errated, or if it hasn't already been errated,
Right.
Tunnel fighter.
We need a cleric. Well, I'll multi-class as a cleric then too. Cleric magic user is actually a pretty potent combination.
That's why I love 3rd edition. That's 3 and 3.5 is because, and 5th edition, because I think you can do all the same stuff. It's just slightly different, but you can have the 3 classes and prestiges and whatever. And that's just like,
I'll have to look.
And that was I think the first character I made, as ridiculous, it was like a half orc barbarian sorcerer, just because I was like, I can do this. I'm allowed to do this. This is awesome. And I fight with this double axe, this orc double axe thing. Oh, this is great. Like, the character was probably garbage. I can't remember, but that was the first third edition character that I built, because I was like, you can actually make a barbarian sorcerer. No. Terrible. They don't go together. They don't go together.
You can make a tabaxi accountant. It doesn't matter in 3rd edition.
I would say if you're going to try to mix those sorts of things, go bard and barbarian, make you a barbarian, and then you got some some good love going on.
Agreed. Barbarian.
All right, so why don't you guys down below tell us some of the things that make D&D so special to you and why they're your favorite? Just any random aspect of it, anything about D&D. Hope you like and subscribe. Yeah, hope we'll see you next time.
Tell your friends, tell your family, tell the Chupacabra. Have a good day, and we're out.
As soon as I can move my mouse to hit stop.